Okay, we're gonna wait for some people to join. We're filming this live on Facebook. Let me know when we've got a few people joining, Cortland. Starting to go? Awesome. Well, hello everybody. My name is Joel Cherico, and this is all the pottery that I made this month. So today is Cyber Monday, and so I've spent about a month getting ready for this day. I thought, oh, it'd be cool to do the biggest batch of grab bag pottery that I've ever done for Cyber Monday, so people could get a good deal for the holidays. So the reason why I do grab bag pottery is because it lets me price all of these individual pieces of art lower. Because when we have to, I make a lot of the same thing over and over again, bowls and cups and mugs, but each one is an individual piece of art with its own glazed drips. So when we take a photo of a pot like this and put it in our online store, we take 3 or 4 photos, we put a SKU number on it, we find a place for it. When someone buys it, we pull it from the shelf so they get the exact piece of art that I made. Even though these are essentially the same style bowl, they're matching. When they're in the store individually, they have to be priced between $75 and $115 is kind of an average for most of the pottery I make. So everything in the grab bag sale is at $49. It's all priced lower. And then other pieces that might be more like $125, $145 are still just at that price. And it lets us just not have to keep inventory of the hundreds and hundreds of pieces. And so you might get a splashy vase, you might get a little ice cream bowl, but then we also put some of our higher end, like these retail for $145, these little Lunar Cups, and then my Neptune planetary inspired mugs by the gas giant Neptune. These retail for $700, and I'm putting 4 of them in this sale. So that's why I do the grab bag pottery. So I can have everything as a good deal, but there's also some ultra high-end pieces in there. This is the biggest one we've ever done for Cyber Monday. We're going year 2 in our pottery studio here, so we've been able to raise production. And so I think I'll just take a few minutes to show you all the pottery that I made, talk about some of the specifics of why I chose certain glazes. If there's any questions, this is a live video, we're filming it, and I'll repost it when it's done. But if there's any questions, save them to the end, and I'll answer some. Otherwise, why don't we just start over here, and I'll show you some of the pots I made and why. So I use 3 basic colorants in my pottery, and they're used by most potters. Iron is brown, and it also makes these yellow drips. Can you see hints of green in here? Find a little more green. This green is from copper carbonate, so iron, copper, and blue is from cobalt. Iron, copper, and cobalt are general colorants that are most common. Potters will use things like strontium and lithium and all kinds of crazy colorants. But these 3 are like a good basic that most potters have in most of their glazes. So I like to get them as raw materials and brush them onto the rim so they drip down in the glazes. All the dripping's happening during the firing. And those are the main colorants I use. The white glaze is an ash glaze, so it's made with wood ashes. And I find that the ashes really help make streaks in an iridescent kind of way. When the glaze gets thick, it's almost marbled on the surface. And so all the horizontal lines, kind of like fur, like animal fur, that's the ashes interacting with the cobalt, or the ashes interacting with the iron. All these little drips here are because the glaze and the ashes in the glaze are interacting with the iron and causing that intricacy. So when I'm doing this, I'm just taking this and dipping it in one glaze and dipping it in another glaze, and it's the interaction of those 2 glazes, and the little bit of ashes and the little bit of cobalt are what give it the intricacy. And you can see on the rim here, it's getting a little thinner, it's almost green. That's because everything is dripping down and it gets thinner on the rim, and the rim of the pot, these are fired to about 2,400 degrees Fahrenheit. The rim is actually a little bit hotter, and that also changes the color. So most of the pottery is simple, things that are, these are little ice cream bowls made to be eaten from or drunk from, coffee mugs, they're all dishwasher safe. So they're simple forms and shapes, thick, durable as you can get with pottery because they're thicker, they're a little heavier. And then simple glazes. Again, this is just 2 glazes, but I want complexity in the simplicity, if that makes sense. So in the whole batch, there's about 200 mugs, 100 bowls, and 100 vases or cups. So about 400 pieces of pottery. I call anything that's kind of splashy experimental, because I just couldn't come up with a better name for it. And so that also gives me the freedom to just pick up red and splash red on here. Or like this one, you see it's kind of brownish with the red. That's because I had some scrap glaze, so I just stuck my hand down in the scrap glaze and went like that. So it's actually like my handprint on there, which just adds another darker color of brown. I didn't know it was gonna be brown. So that's why I make the experimental pottery. Sometimes I'll do standard colors, and sometimes I'll just splash. And like these are another type of experimental pottery. And using basically the same color palette as when I splash, this is after the first firing, this was still on the pottery wheel when I brushed the glaze. So the glaze is actually mixing with the clay on these ones. Where's the mug? I did some mugs in this style too. So this is a dead giveaway because the handle was stuck on top of the pot after it was glazed. Can you see how the glaze is underneath the handle? That's something I'm experimenting with. I've never really done before, is glazing while it's spinning on the pottery wheel, which is why it has these horizontal brush marks, black and red. And then the whole thing's dipped in a clear glaze. So you can actually see my finger marks. If you look really closely, you can probably see the finger marks from dipping it in a clear glaze. What else do we have? So most of the pots are like a dark cobalt blue. I'd say most of the 12-ounce mugs especially, and they're 12 to 16 ounces, some variation in the shapes. A few of the bowls that were also glazed on the pottery wheel. Again, I would just call these experimental because, well, this is the first time I've ever made them. I started making them about 2 months ago, and the first time I ever made bowls in this style. 11 years of doing this as a business and about 15 years of making pottery, and you can always discover something new. Like, I've never done this technique before until last month. That's part of what makes it fun. I think that covers most of the styles of pottery, what the majority of the pottery is like. So I put a couple of really high-end pieces in, like I mentioned, so these all are just random. If you buy a grab bag pot, you might get a little bowl or vase. You might get one of these nicer pieces, and there's obviously fewer of those, but I'm gonna go talk about those. If there's any questions, save them until the end of the video. We'll be done pretty soon here. I'm happy to answer questions. Like I said, I always put at least a few in this batch of 400 pots, some really nice ones, some of my best, more intricate pieces that are much harder to create. This one is called a Kothon, and the story behind this is that I collaborated with an author named Steven Pressfield, who's a New York Times best-selling author, who writes historical fiction about ancient warrior culture, and one of his books, actually 2 of his books, are about the Spartans at the Battle of Thermopylae. And he told me that the Spartans actually had a mug that they carried with them to war, and it had a black interior. And it's written about 2,000 years ago that it was black because they would dip it in rivers where it was really muddy when they're on a war campaign, and it had a wide base and a narrow lip, and the mud would settle in the bottom, and then they could drink off the top when they had to drink like rancid water because they're in battle and they just had to drink them. And they were prized by the Spartans. It was something that their culture made, they're really proud of. So he asked me to duplicate it, or to create like a modern day version of this thing that existed. And so obviously they didn't have red glaze back then, but I made something that was inspired by that shape, but would be useful for like someone who's drinking coffee or tea today for you to use. So I put the Spartan shield on the side, they're bronze shields, and a black glaze inside, and the red is inspired by the cloaks that the Spartans wore, and splattered, some blood inspired by the Battle of Thermopylae. These retail for $300 each, and somebody is gonna get one of those. Spiral Cosmic Mugs from cosmicmugs.com. There are 5 of these. These retail for $165 each. 1 Blue Moon mug. I've not even sold these. I've included them in a couple grab bags because they're new. I haven't really figured out what specifically they're inspired by, because I don't think there is a blue moon. like there's a blood moon that looks like a blood moon. Blue moon is just like a name we gave the moon. I don't think there's any moons in our solar system. Maybe Europa. Europa, I think that's a moon around, it's one of Saturn's moons maybe, but it actually doesn't have craters. It's an ice moon. So this is just a fictional moon. I don't know what this would, at least $500, but someone's gonna get that. 4 Neptune mugs, the most Neptune mugs I've ever created. So the thing that's interesting about these is this is how it was hanging in the kiln. So the glaze, all this dripping was happening during the kiln firing from cobalt. The dark blue drips are raw cobalt on the surface. And is there a flash on there, Cortland? Do you know if there's a flash button you can hit? Okay, can you see inside? It's supposed to look kind of like a galaxy, like a spiral galaxy inside. So each one of those layers to make those colors, I take a little brush and I go inside and I do it about 5 times with 4 different glazes, and each one I apply very carefully with a small brush. So there are 4 Neptune mugs in this grab bag, the most I've ever included. And I think there's 10 Lunar Cups, kind of simple, smaller, little Lunar Cups. They'd be nice for lowball glasses, or cups are nice for tea in the winter because they don't have a handle and they get really hot on the outside. You're going to want a handle if it's hot liquid, but in the winter it's kind of nice because outside of the cup will get hot. I think that's it. I think that's all the pottery I made this month. So thanks for watching. Oh, yarn bowl. I didn't talk about the yarn bowl. This is another experimental bowl, and I dipped the top in the ash glaze, so it's just a little bit lighter, which I thought was interesting. I'm gonna do more of that in the future. I haven't made yarn bowls in years. People have been requesting them. I used to make a lot of them, and so I made a few of these, and I figured I'd just throw one in. So even if you get this and you're not a crocheter or a knitter, I bet you know somebody who is, and this one retailed for $145 that sold yesterday, and again, these are $49. Doesn't matter what you get. So one person is going to get this, even if you're not a knitter. It's kind of a fun piece that I brought back. So yarn goes in there, and then as you spool out the yarn, that's why it has the spiral on the side. And I'm going to make more of these in the future too. It's a lot of fun to make. Really difficult to get clay to do this with how thin it is. But I think that's everything. So any questions?
Not much for questions right now, but I would like to know how the heck we made this many pots in just a couple weeks. I mean, look at that.
Hours. So Cortland is behind the camera right now, and he's our pottery studio technician. Every single one of these, except that table, Cortland has picked up and polished every surface of every pot with 100 grit and 200 grit and 400 grit sanding diamond pads, and on a machine to polish the bottoms so the bottoms are buttery smooth so they don't rub your table, so don't scratch your table. The insides and softening, polishes them before the first firing, so twice. Every single pot, 400 pots. That's a massive amount of labor, but that's what it takes to make things by hand in the United States, and that's what we do at Jericho Pottery. So thanks again for watching. Any other questions before I sign off?
Good old John Goodman would like to know actually how our reds get so vibrant on our experimental mugs.
Yeah, so red is an interesting color. You can tell it's more vibrant here, less vibrant here. Sometimes red is really difficult to get. Other times it's super easy. You just buy it. So this is an easy version of red. I literally just bought red and splashed it on the mugs. What's hard if you're buying, they call it lab fee red. Like if you're taking a pottery class, you pay your lab fee, you get access to the glazes. You can get red and just splash it on a mug. What's hard is to make it look interesting, to make it not just look like a blood splatter or kind of just flat. So the red is vibrant and the red is really muted, right? It's not as vibrant on this piece. And that's what I think is more interesting, is when you can use it to do something artistic, to speak about the drips of the glaze or the splatters, shapes that are kind of like a Rorschach test, where you might see something different in a shape than what I see. And so that's, I look at a lot of abstract painters, Jackson Pollock, Clifford Still, a couple of my favorite painters, even Georgia O'Keeffe. Georgia O'Keeffe is known for flower paintings that kind of look like vaginas, very feminine. but they're abstract. So a lot of her paintings, people are putting their own associations on it. She's really just painting shapes and using color, and is known for something now that she may have never even painted. A lot of her paintings were from landscapes. Sometimes she would paint bones. Sometimes they were purely abstract. I like working within those realms with color and shape. So vibrancy is not really one of my goals. Like I obviously am drawn to the bright red sometimes, but I don't want too much of it, because it's not only easy to get, but it doesn't help the art just to make it vibrant. And like these pieces that I made, some that were just red. I brushed red on here, and it didn't really look right. So then I brushed black on top of it, and the black it kind of turned blue. It's like a bluish gray. And it didn't really look like right when it was just red, but the red and the black together, more muted, added enough intricacy where there was something about it that was really beautiful. The light, the dark. Same with the Kothon mugs, the Spartan warrior mugs. It's actually not just red. You can see some black over the red, it kind of looks dirty, or there's like a splatter of black, and I actually brushed some black. So if you look at cloth, it kind of looks like the cloaks that inspire these, that the warriors wore around their shoulders, there's shadow. So instead of just red flat, the red and black layering makes it look kind of like shadow and adds intricacy. Does that answer your question? Something like that? Any other questions before I sign off? Cool. Thanks for watching, everybody. If you want to grab Bag Pop, there's a link in the title of the video. Cyber Monday today, and then tomorrow they'll be on sale. And then whatever's left and doesn't sell, then we'll take them and photograph them, and they'll be available at a higher price with multiple photos of the individual pots. So today and tomorrow. Have a happy holiday season. We're not doing any more sales in December, so this is it. Okay, thanks for watching, and see you next time.